So before we get into all the news today, I just wanted to briefly touch on the underestimated efficacy of these Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian oil infrastructure facilities. Last night, apparently, we hit two more, one in Ryazan, or Ukraine hit two more. One in Ryazan, which is the third largest in terms of capacity in all of Russia, and one in Lugansk, a Russian-occupied Lugansk. Apparently, that particular facility is the one that supplies the Russian troops that are apparently about to launch a major offensive involving about 125,000 troops to try to take the entirety of the Donetsk region, which they've been unable to do now for 11 years, right? And why I wanted to bring this up is, okay, so I mean, they've even, out in the Khabarovsk region, for example, they have a PR campaign where Putin rolled out the governor of that region to tell everyone that the reason that there's no gas is because, well, two reasons. A week ago, it was because of tourism. The tourists had used all the gas. And then they rolled him out again. They said, no, that didn't work. Let's try this other thing. Let's say the fishermen took it, right? Yeah, because fishermen, that's a big industry out there on the Pacific Ocean. This is way out on the Pacific Ocean. This is closer to the U.S. than it is to Ukraine, right? This is the scale of the catastrophe that's unfolding in Russia. The largest steel manufacturer in Russia yesterday came out and said that Russia is now descending into 1990s scale crisis. And today, when asked about the situation in the Russian economy, Putin said that there's no money only because of the increased government investment in public infrastructure. Yeah. Russia's trying to cover it up as much as they can domestically, but what's shameful is the fact that Western media just still refuses. I mean, no, you would never see like a Bloomberg analysis of this beyond maybe like the superficial. Yes, 24% of Russian oil refining capacity is offline. They don't go any further than that. Like, what happens after that? What's the aggregate effect on the entirety of the Russian economy? Because it's huge and completely being understated. And it's nothing but an economic catastrophe. I mean, forcing the banks to buy Russian government bonds in the ultimate method of capital destruction ever. I mean, so the banks can't lend out to people anymore. Mortgage issuances are down 60% year over year. They're not lending money to people. They're lending money now to the government at the point of a gun. Issuing government bonds. The private banks then have to buy these bonds. The government then takes that money, invests it into North Korean weapons factories, slamming ballistic missiles into apartment buildings in Ukraine. And in the end, there's nothing. They're not building roads. There's nothing for the people of Russia anymore. They're directly looting the private sector of the economy in order to fund this war. And when the CEO of the largest steel company in Russia says that the scale of the coming economic catastrophe in Russia will be on par with the 90s, I think it's going to be worse. Because back then, the Russian military, well, Russia had a military. They still had last time that the USSR collapsed, 1990, they had 50 years of stockpiled military gear to defend themselves, and the world knew that. China knew that. I mean, but China wasn't really powerful to do much back then. But all the enemies, all these nations that are harboring ancient territorial grievances, everyone's been wronged by Russia at some point. There's a lot of pissed off countries, a lot of generations. Everyone in Ukraine, for example, everyone in Poland, everyone in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, everyone has relatives, ancestors that were killed, deported. Everyone has those stories. There will be no sympathy for Russia this time, and they won't have a military to defend themselves. So it's going to be worse than the 1990s, because last time they really only had themselves to fear. They had the breakdown of their domestic society. Things were ridiculously violent. But now they have enemies both foreign and domestic. I mean, Russia is going to be ripe for the picking. And we're all here for it. Is anyone going to, and maybe if Trump's still in office at that point, he'll he'll do something to save his old buddy, but I don't know. I don't know. There'll be a lot of, you've got Russian gas fields, I mean, diamonds, everything in the periodic table is in that country and will be ripe. And skipping over to the next ongoing catastrophe within the Russian economy, the Russian banking sector. This is a chart we've been posting every few days or so, and it's only getting worse and worse. We got a net outflow from the Russian banking sector, around $500 million just in the past 4 days, from September 1st through September 4th. It's now September 5th. This is yesterday's data. You can get this stuff from yourself. You can get this stuff yourself from the Russian central bank. We will continue to post this until people will begin talking about it. As you can see, Russians, with the election of Trump, they became very optimistic as he recited Kremlin talking points from the White House and from the Oval Office. And then reality began to set in, as you can see, and the smart Russians started to figure out what was going on. And things are not well in the Russian banking sector. No one is going to save Russia at this point. We are headed to the 1990s. And to elaborate further on the Russian government's new scam that I mentioned a minute ago, in which the Russian government is issuing bonds, they then force the banks to buy those bonds rather than issuing mortgages and lending cash out to the public to further economic growth, or to at least stall the economic implosion. Russian government, this is the circulation of Russian government bonds. As you can see, we have a 400% increase year over year. The orange line is 2024, the red line is 2025. The Russian government is issuing an absolute blitz of bonds right now and forcing, I mean, these aren't foreigners buying these aren't Chinese. You know, this isn't the Chinese central bank. Who else does Russia have as friends? It's not Belarus. It's not Nicaragua. It's not Brazil. It's not North Korea. This is the Russian government sucking cash from the banks, forcing them to buy Russian government bonds. So let's game this out. What is going to happen at the end of this when we find out that Russian government's asset sheet, I mean, the Russian banking sector, the asset sheets are pretty much going to be what? Government bonds, worthless government bonds. What's the Russian government doing with this money that they're forcing the banks to hand over? Well, they're building missiles. They're building missiles in North Korean weapons factories. All that stuff's destroyed. I mean, they're building, they're making they're buying artillery shells to then bomb Ukraine and to send ballistic missiles into Ukrainian apartment buildings. That is what is backing Russian government bonds right now. And the Russian banking sector is increasingly sitting on that rather than sitting on mortgages and car loans and corporate loans, corporate bonds. They are buying what will be worthless Russian government bonds, and the amount is just staggering. I mean, billions a month, and I don't know why nobody's talking about this yet. They will be. So you say the Russian economy is not doing well. There must be some good news here. I mean, surely it's the Russian military, right? I mean, mainstream media is telling me that Russia is advancing, and we must immediately bow down to Russia because, Putin he's going to nuke us. I mean, occasionally he is on a horse and he's not even wearing a shirt. I mean, who knows what this guy is capable of? I mean, we need to bow down. But I mean, really, the Russian military, I mean, historically, they are, I mean, you can't mess with them. I mean, Trump has been telling us that they are a war culture, that they have a strong military. Kremlin talking point from the Oval Office. No, the Russian military is on its damn knees. I mean, stories like this are every day. I'm going to start covering more of these, but it's really just too many. Every day, just crazy stuff happens in the Russian military. I mean, throwing guys in pits. I mean, mass murder within the units. Okay, but anyway, today we have an HIV and hepatitis epidemic within Russian military, prompts new segregated units. So the Russian military, according to the Russian side, this is from a Russian military, this is from a Russian blogger. They are now taking the people that are infected. It's an epidemic. It says emerging epidemic of HIV and hepatitis within Russian units. They are now taking these guys and setting them in their own little units to be used for absolute frontline activity. The Russian armed forces have begun forming segregated units made up of soldiers diagnosed with HIV, hepatitis, and other serious illnesses. According to posts reviewed on Telegram channel, a pro-Kremlin commentator, Anastasia Kashavarova. The directive reportedly orders these troops to be grouped together, tasked with holding defensive positions, meat waves, and marked with distinctive armbands identifying their medical category. Kashavarova described what she called an emerging epidemic of HIV and hepatitis among Russian units, citing poor sanitary conditions, limited oversight, and cases of soldiers concealing pre-existing illnesses in order to secure enlistment contracts. Some, she wrote, entered service with forged medical certificates. Others were diagnosed only after deployment. So you can read the rest of it, this on Kyiv Insider. Yeah, that's just, instead of sending these guys home, they do the most Russian thing ever. That's exactly what I would assume that they would do with these guys. But you say that, well, at least, okay, so the military's falling apart, the economy's falling apart. At least the price of oil is doing all right. Oh my Lord, look at this. What are we down? About 8% in the past week. Yeah, okay, well, things aren't doing well in the Russian economy or really in anything. But at least OPEC's got the Führers back, right? The OPEC will make sure Russia's okay. They're old buddies, right? Oh, no, since April, we are now down to, I guess Saudi wants to increase production yet again, another 1.6 million barrels a day across OPEC, when they have already increased 400,000 a day every single month since April. Grabbing that Russian market share, driving down price, that's both hurting Russia, it's enabling Saudi Arabia and other OPEC nations to grab all that Russian market share, and it helps out Trump. So Trump's happy because it'll help his domestic situation with keeping oil prices low. Everybody's happy. So things are not going well for Russia. So next time, you meet the guy down the street, your neighbor, whatever, and he's on these Russian propaganda sites, and he's rattling off these Kremlin talking points. Hopefully you can use some of this stuff that I put out there and to go into these arguments well armed, because Russia is 100% imploding, and it's going to be awesome. All right, have a good day.